everybody, and welcome to Flavor Text, a podcast where we examine the stories in Arkham Horror, the card game, scenario by scenario, and how they align with the gameplay. I'm CrabbyTerror8, and I'm joined, as usual, by Kevling. Hi, Kevling. How are you?
Yeah, I'm absolutely fine. Yeah, you?
I haven't left the house in 2 weeks, but apart from that, I'm okay.
Oh, of course, you're locked down again, aren't you?
Oh, completely, totally locked down, yes. So
we are the complete opposite, I'm afraid. I'm sure nobody wants to hear lockdown talk, but yeah, everything's lifted here pretty much.
Wow.
You still got lots of businesses and shops trying to be semi-responsible by saying, we would really still like you to wear a mask if you don't mind, please.
Yes.
But obviously, there's nothing we can do about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's pretty much back to normal now. With just, I did notice I was out for a drive yesterday, and we kept having government-sponsored adverts on the radio going, it's still a good idea, to still be careful and still wear a mask in a crowded place or on the bus, Yeah, you got to laugh, but yeah, they're making it personal choice here.
Right, interesting. Well, here in Australia, it's kind of given Australians an excuse to watch the Olympics all day, every day. So, there has been that literally binged on the Olympics. So that's been the one. A benefit. And what you were talking about before, there's a big Sydney-Melbourne rivalry. So Melbourne or Victoria have been literally putting ads in Sydney saying, do not enter the state of Victoria without a pass. You are not allowed. It's like, okay. So there's a bit of that. But yes, been a lot of Olympic watching. So that's something anyway. So
excellent.
So I know we're here to talk about Blood on the Altar, but we had some interesting feedback actually from a couple of people from our Essex County Express episode, and it's always nice to hear what people's thoughts are. Actually, a mate of mine, Jason, who I play in real life here in Sydney, actually posted something which I thought was an interesting extra point. He said that the first time he played Essex County Express, he was, the surprise that the encounter deck can actually insta-kill you was quite a revelation, was quite a surprise that first time, because you don't expect that, you've played The Gathering, you've played Midnight Mass, you don't expect that literally you can be taken out of the game by the encounter deck like that if you happen to be in the wrong carriage. So I thought that was an interesting...
Yeah, I think we kind of touched on it, didn't we?
Yes.
But we never actually made the connection, you could have a complete wipe.
Yeah, exactly. So it's one of those great things about this game is that it's incredibly flexible, and there are so many ways that you can kind of mess with the core mechanics that would be very difficult to do with other sorts of card games, particularly competitive card games. But because it's more of a cooperative thing, the game can do all kinds of shenanigans, I suppose, to kind of switch things up. And I guess Essex County Express does that. And on that point, actually, this was not some feedback, but I was listening to Drawn to the Flame, the latest episode. I don't know if you've heard it, about solo and multiplayer. It's a really good episode. And in that, Frank mentions the insta-fail effect in Essex County Express, which, again, we kind of skirted around it, but it is possible in a multiplayer game that you could trigger the Mythos phase in the first turn if you draw the wrong cards. You draw a... what's it called? I keep thinking Mysterious Chanting, but it's not Mysterious Chanting. It's
Ancient Evils.
Ancient Evils. You draw an Ancient Evils, you draw a couple of cultists, and before you know it, it's triggered and everybody's died because they're still in the first carriage. So
and there's only 4 doom thresholds, so you've only got a narrow window, haven't you, that all of that could actually happen in.
Yeah, which would leave everybody kind of open mouthed, like, what? But you know what? Everyone just gets sucked up into the void and dumped somewhere, and you all just walk together, I suppose, hand in hand, tripping down the railway line till you get to Dunwich. So it's not the end of the world. But yeah, that was another interesting thing. And Athanasius also posted something about he was saying that MJ has said in her blog, which is an awesome blog called Beware the Black Cat, that's all in one word, talks about her inspirations being video games and movies. And Athanasius was making the point that, I guess we said that scenarios have to kind of forward the narrative. So they were making the point that that's actually not necessarily the case. You can just have a high action scenario that gives you a feeling of urgency without having to necessarily propel the story forward. So I thought that was an interesting additional point there that they made. So yeah, interesting. Although I would say that there's a bit of that Deus ex machina thing that, as we talked about, suddenly there's a tear in the sky and it's all terribly urgent. So it's a little bit manufactured in that sense.
Yes. Yeah.
But I think that's a good point. You don't, if you're just going for a kind of a feeling of terror or a feeling of kind of, urgency, then I guess that scenario works in that way, I guess. Blood on the altar is where we're at. So we've walked the train line or got off the train, and we're here, aren't we?
We certainly are. I suppose one of the most straightforward things to start with is the various different consequences we could be under based on how we've played the scenario so far.
Yeah.
Firstly, if we all got defeated in Essex, so maybe we were all still sat in that first train carriage and we all got defeated, we are now classed as being delayed on the way to Dunwich, which means we start this scenario with an extra doom. Another change was be in House Always Wins. That rare instance where you managed to get Peter Clover out of the club would be the only circumstance where the abandoners didn't have a bone to pick with you.
Yeah.
So in most cases you've got an extra encounter set in the deck here.
Yeah.
And yeah, the odd thing there was the way it worded it on the instructions was they followed you from the Clover Club. What, they followed you all the way through Arkham and through that levitating train? Yes. Okay. They're good, those Abanians, aren't they?
Yeah, I have to say, they feel a bit peripheral to everything. I don't feel like they're that kind of necessary in the overall story, and that they are here. I don't know what you think, but they feel a bit...
I think they're just like an annoyance, aren't they, in the deck when one of those thugs turns up stopping you earning resources and things like that.
Yeah, and the other thing it does is, this is just in my own mind, I always had this idea of, with Blood on the Altar, you're prowling around this horrible village that's sort of, very, very kind of, oppressive. But if there's a whole lot of thugs prowling around the village as well, it'd be like Disneyland. There'd be all these people there. You know what I mean? It kind of, in a way, undercuts the isolation if there's a whole lot of other people there as well. Because I don't imagine it's a very big place. So it sort of struck me as a little bit strange that it was so populated with people outside of town all of a sudden. But anyway, interesting. So so that like you say, that really does operate to just make things that much more difficult if they've got a bone to pick with you, right? So
yeah, and also this is the first scenario in the campaign so far where there are no changes to the Chaos Pack. Yes, other than the ones you may have inherited from cheating in House Always Wins, or letting what's his face, the security guard, was it the security guard in the museum, letting him die?
Yes, yep.
Yeah, that also put a tablet in the bag, I think it was.
Yeah,
I'll remember his name in a minute.
Yeah, I know who you mean.
Wolfstead and Lynch, wasn't it?
That's right. Yeah, and that's probably a welcome relief, because by now you could have actually really chalked up quite a few chaos tablets. So it's good.
There's a tablet for failing to save the students in an extracurricular activity, another one for failing to save Wolfstead or Lynch. Yep. There's an elder thing if you cheated in the House Always Wins, and another elder thing if you took the Necronomicon. So that's potentially 4 bad tablets you've added through your decisions so far.
Yes, wow. Quite. They talk about the deck being stacked against you. That's quite a bit. So Yes.
But as we were saying with Essex, once you know these things, it will help inform those decisions as you play, and you can manoeuvre things so that you don't get those negative consequences.
Yes. There's that sort of inevitable learning effect. So we Zebulon and Earl, the dynamic duo of Dunwich, to turn up to sort of meet you. I think that's in the sort of the opening text here. And the thing that I like, and we'll see this later, but the thing that I like that's very clever that the developers did was that the text has them talking, and they've used the same style of talking as Lovecraft did in the Dunwich Horror. This sort of trying to kind of create this sort of New England backwoods kind of accent. So they've stuck to that style, and it's really nice that they did that, because that gives it this lovely link back to the original story in a really kind of tangible way. It's almost like you're reading. It's almost like Lovecraft could have written this as the sort of follow-up story, and they've just taken this as an excerpt from it. And I really appreciate the way that they did that. That's really quite nice. So then we turn up, and there's no kind of right into it. We've got to go to bed, apparently. It's like we're too tired for anything. It's kind of got to go to bed and get up in the morning and start.
Because that kind of makes a mockery of having an extra doom for being delayed on the way to Dunwich. All it would have meant would you slept a little bit less.
That's such a good point. That we've talked about this sense of urgency, and there's things have got to be done sooner rather than later, and there's a doom on. But when we get there at this place that we know that this place has bad shit gone down in the past. No, we're just going to sort of have a good night's sleep, and then kind of maybe time moved a bit slower in the 1920s, Kevling. Maybe that's why.
Yeah. Maybe that extra doom just reflects you've had a little bit of a deprived night's sleep. So you've not had as much rest as you could have done. Yes. So you've started in a little bit of a setback.
Yes, yeah.
Perhaps, I don't know.
But it does set up the classic thing that you wake up and the people who've brought, who are there to, sort of show you around have disappeared. And
everybody's
gone. So, it gives you the motivation to then go, oh, they've gone. We better go and find out what's happened to them.
Let's go and have a wander.
But why couldn't they? Why couldn't you just have turned up and they not be there, and they were supposed to pick you up? And so you go looking for, you know what I mean? Like, I wonder why they had to have this, you've got to go to bed, and then you get up.
I suppose it gives you the backstory that there are other people that have gone missing. It's not just them two that have gone missing. There are others, which is your potential sacrifices deck, which we'll be talking about in a moment.
Yes, interesting. So that's the sort of the setup. So Yeah.
So then, in terms of the mechanical setup, we've got almost a completely. There are so many random elements to this setup. It's pretty unique, I think, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. It's like true. Yeah, it's like almost completely random, really, isn't it?
Yeah. The only thing that's standard is there's the village commons in the middle.
Yep.
And there are 5 out of the 6 locations in play. One of them is left out at random, and also there's 2 different versions of each of those locations as well. So maybe I should have sat and worked out how many permutations there are, but yes, I'm not doing it live on a podcast, that's for sure.
A lot. You probably have to play it
a lot.
Yes, you probably have to play it 30 times or more, I reckon, to even attempt to cover all the possible combinations. It's a lot. Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah, and then in addition to it being a random choice of 2 out of 5 randomly selected locations out of 6, you then put the hidden chamber and the key at random under 2 of those locations, and then the top 3 encounter cards under 3 others. So that's another element of randomization. So it's random as to which locations are in play. It's random as to which version of those locations are in play, and then it's random about which of those locations we need to investigate to make progress.
Yeah, which is a great way to reflect the idea that you don't know this place.
Yes.
And you're sort of,
and unlike, say, Miskatonic Museum, there's no way of gaming it, that you've got no hint as to which of those locations you need to investigate. In Miskatonic, we knew that the room we were looking for was definitely going to be one of the last three, so we could skip the first three if necessary.
Yes.
But there's no gaming it here. You have got to go and check out each location until you find the two things you're looking for.
Yes, and I remember the first time I played it, I think the key and the location were the last places I went, and that was solo, and I think that's the only... I mean, I like that sort of completely random element. It's never the same. You don't know where things are. Like you say, you can't game them, and that reflects the story really nicely. The problem is it tends to make solo play harder, I think. I think it, because there's a possibility that solo play, you really don't find something till the very end, and when you're playing solo, that's really quite difficult, and particularly if you add, which we'll get into in a second, is that some locations auto-generate enemies as well. It's quite punishing for a solo player, I think, this scenario. I think. Yeah,
yes, you can be, unless, like we say, the random element is on your side.
Yeah, you just happen to get the key, and I mean, it's possible you happen to get the key in the hidden room, the hidden chamber, literally in the first two locations, and it's happy days. So but that's just once you know this scenario, you've got different expectations anyway. But yes, it does make it, for a solo player, it's you probably want to move through the locations as fast as possible, and maybe then think about getting the clues, because I think when I played it the first time true solo, I was like picking up the clues, and rather than trying to move around as much as I could. I don't know, it's quite hard. So
and then in terms of the agenda and the act that's in play, obviously we've got Agenda 1A, Strange Disappearances. That's basically telling you that we know we've had this string of disappearances, we need to find out where they are. But then Act 1A simply says objective: when you enter the hidden chamber, advance. Oh right, okay, so they're all in the hidden chamber, are they? Right, brilliant. Thanks.
It sort of tells you.
There's
really
no sense of deduction or investigation there. Okay, there is a hidden chamber in one of these buildings. We have got to find it.
It's really interesting you bring that up, because in later campaigns they sort of say you'll know what to do when it arises.
Yes.
It doesn't tell you, it just sort of says, don't worry, you'll find out what you're supposed to do. You sort of trust the process. You will know what to do when the time comes. Whereas in this one, it just tells.
In fact, they've already done that on this campaign, haven't they? They did that on the Miskatonic University, wasn't it? Where there was the three different objectives, wasn't there? And it says when you find,
yes,
it was. You had to find out whether you were saving the students or finding, was it the solution, or I can't remember the other two. But that was the same thing, wasn't it? So it's not as though it was something they introduced later.
Yes. Yeah.
So just a little bit of a quirk there that just doesn't feel quite right narratively.
Yeah, I suppose because there's two things you've got to get. It's not like you can go, you find this key and you don't know what it's for, or you find this room but you can't unlock it. You know what I mean? For some reason, they made this decision. I don't know. I guess you've got to find two things,
I guess it's finding the two things then lets you be able to do that.
Yep.
Because you find a key, and I think you put it in play, don't you? As soon as you find the key,
yes.
And with the chamber, there's text on it saying it's unrevealed, it's classed as unrevealed, or you can't enter it unless you've got the key. I think you attach the key to the chamber to to signify that it's unlocked, don't you? I think, and
Yes.
that's the point. You can enter it.
Yeah, it says that.
So it does sort of explain it there. It's just that giveaway there. You need to go into the hidden chamber.
Yes.
It just didn't feel right to me.
Yeah, it's got key to the chamber. If the hidden chamber is connected to the tarnished silver key was hidden and kept safe out of sight. It must lead to somewhere important. See, it's interesting. The text actually doesn't say, "Oh, it's the hidden chamber key." You know, there's a great big
Right.
label on it going, "The hidden chamber." It's just like, oh, this is an important key. But so there's a bit of a disconnect between what I think the story's trying to say, which is, oh, that's a key. I wonder what that's for. And oh, there's this place that we can't get into, and then it's sort of, making the connection. As a player, you know what you've got to do. So there's a sort of a dissonance between the knowledge that the player has versus their character in the game, so to speak. Yeah.
True.
In that way. Yeah. But still, I think what this scenario does really well, and I understand why people like this scenario so much, is it does a good job of that feeling of searching, looking, and in a way, and we'll get into the specifics of the locations. In a way, the village itself is an enemy. The village itself is what you're sort of fighting against as much as the humans or the animals. You know what I mean? It's like everything is against you. And I think they do a really good job of kind of bringing that idea to life, that you really are in a very hostile place, that nobody wants you to be there, including the
some of the encounter cards relay that as well. Like there's the Dunwich one specifically. There's Unhallowed Country. You cannot play allies, and any allies you've got.
Yep.
You treat them as blank, so it's really like you are not welcome here.
Yes, exactly, things like that. So I think that's really nice, the way that they and the picture itself on the act. This poor hapless investigator's walking around with a lantern, looking not very comfortable. Because you just think at any moment something bad's going to happen, and so I think they do a really good job with that. Yeah. Yeah. So like you say, you set everything out. It's completely random. You start at the village commons, and you've really... And the thing is, it's not hard to know what you've got to do. You've got to kind of get around these locations and try and find out what's going on.
And the mechanic is that there's these... you've got 3 encounter cards and the key in the chamber hidden under each of the locations, each of the randomised locations, shall I say, because the village commons doesn't get one.
Yep.
But you have to actually clear all the clues on each location to be able to reveal that hidden card. So it is narratively that fits in. You are investigating each location, and once you've found all the clues, you can then see whether there was anything hidden there after all.
Yeah, exactly.
Or you've just been ambushed.
Exactly. And I mean, we talked about in the last, Essex, that that they were using the clues to stop you just running down the train to the end, but it didn't feel like it was really about discovering clues per se, whereas this feels like you're absolutely searching, you're absolutely looking and trying to find what's going on. So it feels, like you say, very much aligned with the narrative, much more closely in that way. Yeah. So these locations are fantastic. And I think a lot of them actually are referred to in the original story, at least in passing. And what I like about all these locations is that they've used a lot of the text from the original story. So again, there's this really nice connection, which gives it this lovely additional level of flavor, I think, to the text, because
you said the podcast name. Ding ding ding.
And village commons for I try and get that in every single time if I can. Yes. Like the village common. In fact, the village commons one I think has 2. It's like on both sides. It's got different...
Oh, yeah, it has, doesn't it? Yeah.
So on the unrevealed side, it just says the sparsely scattered houses wear a surprisingly uniform aspect of age, squalor, and dilapidation. And then on the other side, it's hard to prevent the impression of a faint, malign, odour about the village street, as of the massed mould and decay of centuries. Oh, that's so Lovecraftian, isn't it? That's so fantastic. So it's really nice the way they use that text from the original story to sort of bring to life how horrible this village actually is. Yes.
One thing I also noticed looking at the locations is, unlike one of the things we discussed on Essex, was how swingy the whole scenario can be depending on how the randomness of the carriages. At least on this one, every single random pair has the same number of clues, so there's no difference in the number of tests you've got to do to get through it.
Yep.
But there are maybe some minor changes in difficulty. It goes up or down by one, perhaps.
Yep.
Or there's some other function on the card that makes it more difficult. So it's a lot less swingy, and it's more standardised, I suppose, because it is exactly the same number of clues for Bishop's Brook, depending on which version you get.
Yep.
As an example, all of the matched pairs are the same quantity of clues.
Yeah, and we saw that with Miskatonic Museum as well, didn't we? That for some reason, some of the locations had different numbers of clues. I think we saw it with the what are they called, the security office, and the other one, the other office. We saw that depending on which version you got, there was different numbers of clues or something, and we couldn't work out why that would be. You know, why would you take the same location? Yes, you've got a random one, but why would you?
Yeah, it was the admin office. There was one clue on one version and two clues on the other.
Yeah, which I'm glad it feels fairer if sure, change the effects, but it feels a little bit fairer to have the same number of clues on a particular location, I suppose, because it is random.
Yeah, now, I was going to say, there's no swinginess in that. You could have a version that's one shroud and a version that's four shroud. They all only appear to be, they're either the same or just one different from each other. It's like 2 and 3 or 1 and 2.
Exactly, and the higher shroud one tends to be a little bit easier on the investigators. The lower shroud one tends to be a bit more challenging. So that feels fair, I suppose, because, you know, it's about sort of turn efficiency and things like that. But, you know, in a situation where you have, you know, randomness and you had different numbers of clues, you could have situations where you get a lot fewer clues, which in this scenario would be a benefit, or get more clues, which would disadvantage you as well. So it's good that they, like you say, they balance that out in that.
And in fairness, I think they had to, based on how things change once the hidden chamber comes into play.
Yes. Let's be tourists and let's take people on a stroll through the wonderful village of Dunwich. Because the village commons, we can resign here, can't we? That's nice and thoughtful,
this
isn't it?
Suicide. We're better off hiding out the night. Hiding out the night? We've just been to sleep and just woke up.
Yeah, that's right. Let's have another sleep. In fact, let's not do anything. Let's
Maybe
just
we slept
sleep
the whole day.
That's right. Let's just avoid everything and be unconscious. And when we wake up in 2 weeks' time, it'll all be over. One way or the other. Or we'll never wake up.
It was all a dream.
It was all a dream. Yeah, funny. And I guess there's what's the next location? If we're starting at the village commons, we can stroll to where can we stroll to from there?
Right, I'm looking at just in the order they are on Arkham DB.
Yeah.
So the first one I've got is Bishop's Brook.
Ah, yes.
And the unrevealed flavour text, I've said it now, ding ding. One dreads to trust the tenebrous tunnel of the bridge, yet there is no way to avoid it.
Did you have to look up the word tenebrous or tenebrous? Did you have to look that up?
I It's one of those words that I always have a guess as to what it means, and I've never looked it up. So, did you?
Well, luckily, my note I take notes on my Apple iPad, and you can literally highlight a word and look it up. So it makes it very easy.
Look up Tenebrous.
And it's the kind of thing that Lovecraft used all the time. Was these words? Tenebrous or tenebrous is dark, shadowy, and obscure. Apparently, Kevling.
Right, there you go.
Yes, so that's what it is. It's sort of a dark tunnel, basically.
And you've got that on the picture as well, haven't you? You're sort of having to go underneath this dark, foreboding bridge to get to another part of the of the town.
Looks like the church is there in the distance, and a couple of other things.
Looks like it's got all sorts of birds flying around it.
Ah, yes, there'll be some whippoorwills, no doubt.
Yeah, of course. And then this first version of Bishop's Brook, it's a shroud of 3 with 2 clues. Each enemy at Bishop's Brook deals an extra horror when it's attacking. And then, as with all of the other locations, you can draw the encounter card once you've revealed or once you've discovered all of the clues.
Yes.
Yes. And that's like a free trigger action.
Yep.
It's not a trigger, player window action.
Interesting that this is a fixed number of clues as well, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, I think 3 of the locations are fixed, and 3 of them are based on the number of investigators.
I can understand why they did it that way, because they want a minimum number of clues on the hidden chamber, I guess.
Yeah.
Whereas if you were solo play, it might be a bit lower. Although, to be fair, that might have been better for people in solo play to have a fewer number of clues, I suppose. But anyway, walking under the train station or to the train line to get to Bishop's Brook.
And then the second version of Bishop's Brook, it's the same shroud and number of clues, but the ability there is if there is an investigator at Bishop's Brook, other investigators cannot enter Bishop's Brook.
Yeah. Yes.
So that's interesting. I don't think we've seen that before, where only one person could be in a location.
Yeah.
I don't think I've seen it much since either.
No, I was going to say, it's not something that pops up. I'm thinking in the Forgotten Age, there's some locations in sort of underground and things that you can, like whether it's a narrow tunnel or something that I'm trying to remember. I think you can only have one person there or something. Maybe.
Yeah, it's not something they've done very much, is it?
No, it isn't. It isn't.
I mean, you can almost understand it if it's a narrow tunnel that you're having to get through, but the picture doesn't look like that unless that's really zoomed in. But yeah, I'll give them that one.
Yeah.
Do you want to take Burned Ruins?
Yes, the Burned Ruins. The Burned Ruins.
Burned.
Yes. So this one here, again, we've got another quote from the Dunwich Horror. It is not reassuring to see on a closer glance that most of the houses are deserted and falling to ruin. Which is rather amusing. That's typical Lovecraft, tell. So rather than spending time sort of making you feel, oh boy, I wouldn't want to have a closer glance, he tells you, you know what I mean? He tells you what to think, and so the Burned Ruins is no exception there. So this one, the 2 versions, one's a higher shroud, 3 shroud. They've both got 3 clues on it, so again a fixed number of clues. The high shroud one, each enemy in the Burned Ruins gets +1 evade. Now the lower shroud version with 2 shroud, if you fail a skill test while investigating the Burned Ruins, flip 1 clue token on the Burned Ruins to its doom side. So it's that kind of idea. So
and that can actually be a benefit, can't it? Because that can actually help you get the card that's underneath more quickly, which I think we found when we did our practice run last week.
That's right. I mean, it's a trade-off, right? So this is not like Essex County. You've got a bit more time with the doom. So if you're running fairly fast, you're right. You might actually deliberately, and if you're running, the character that you're playing is Stella. you might actually want to fail.
Yeah.
Because
which is actually what happened to us, isn't it? I was Stella. I walked into this location, failed the investigator, and I had a look what I found.
Yep.
So one of the clues turned to a doom, and I picked up the other two, and then revealed the encounter card in one action.
Yeah. So
but obviously, by having a doom, you've lost an entire turn potentially, depending on when it happened.
Yeah. So that's the burned.
Unless you're in the witching hour, in which case it didn't really matter.
Anyway, exactly. So that's the burned ruins.
Yeah. Also, it's almost a double benefit there as well, because that's also one less clue to be moved to the hidden chamber in the next phase as well.
Yes. Yeah. So you could potentially game things a little bit by actually trading off the doom for the clues, possibly.
Maybe.
Yeah, depending on how fast.
Yeah, depending on the number of players, it's robbing you of that many multiples of 3 actions, isn't it? One doom really taking an entire turn off you.
Yeah. So
might be better for a solo player.
Yes, possibly. Yeah. So there you go. There's the.
Okay, so shall I take the next one? That's Osborne's General Store.
Mm-hmm.
And then, our flavour text there is, from the air of hushed fright at Osborne's store, they knew something hideous had happened.
I don't know about you, but this looks like a bit of a fire hazard, this Osborne's General Store.
They've not done a health and safety risk assessment, have they?
Just saying. Oh boy!
Right, so the first version of it is 2 shrouds and it's 1 clue per investigator, and it's got the rule that you cannot gain resources while you're in Osborne's General Store. So it's relatively easy to investigate because it's only a 2, but you're not going to be getting any resources during upkeep or through any other method. And then the second version, it's a higher shroud again, so it's a 3 shroud, but still 1 clue per investigator. But as an action here, you can spend a resource to search the top 3 cards for an item and add it to your hand. So you get an extra benefit there, which will cost you an action. So I guess that's why it's a little bit more difficult to investigate, because you could actually get something out of it while you're there.
Never understood why you can go to the general store from the village commons, but you can't go from the general store back to the village commons. I mean, I know in some scenarios it sort of makes sense that you can only go one way. For example,
like from the balcony.
Yes, I was exactly.
Carcosa.
Because you ain't climbing back up on the balcony if you've jumped down. Possibly because you've twisted your ankle.
Maybe it's a one-way street and we're very law-abiding citizens.
Yeah, it just feels a bit arbitrary. I don't know. Anyway, I mean, it is what it is, but it's a bit strange.
There is perhaps it's something to do with some of the encounter cards drop you at the central location, so maybe it's just to force you to take a certain path.
Yeah.
Or I think there's certain enemies spawn at that central location as well, so maybe it's to force you to get back to that location.
But yeah, I don't know why, but like you say, it is what it is. I mean, it's not a big deal anyway. It's not like people go, "Oh, I've got to run back to the village commons and resign." It's it's not a big problem, but just interesting that they did it that way.
Okay, do you want to do Congregational Church?
Yes, I will. Congregational Church. A bit of a longer text here from our friend HP. I myself did not more than a fortnight ago catch a very plain discourse of evil powers in the hill behind my house, wherein there were a rattling and a rolling, groaning, screeching, and hissing, such as no things of this earth could raise up. Congregational Church, and here they're both pretty low shroud of 2 and shroud of 1. The 2 shroud location, they both got 1 clue per investigator. You can choose and discard a card from your hand to get 2 resources if you so wish. And the other one, though, is one of these locations where it will insta-spawn a enemy. So after the Congregational Church is revealed, search the encounter deck for a humanoid enemy and spawn it at the village commons. Shuffle the encounter deck. So a humanoid enemy could be one of the, I guess, O'Banion gang if you wanted, or it could be one of these many servants of many mouths, I suppose.
Yes.
Could be another one. So it's one of those locations where an enemy has to be spawned. If you happen to get that version, it's a little bit easier to investigate, but you end up with an enemy hanging around as a consequence.
We've got House in the Reeds I've got next. Even the locals stay away from this half-sunken hovel.
It's not kind of a real estate
really
advertising, is
yeah,
it?
When you look at the picture, it's sort of half falling into the swamp or something, it looks like.
It makes me wonder why you'd bother.
Split
Yeah,
down the
you'd
middle.
bother even going there. It looks like you got to swim to it. Wow.
Maybe you paddle over using that floating barrel, perhaps.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, first version, it's Shroud of Two. Again, 1 clue per investigator. While you're in the House of Reeds, you cannot play events. Whereas the other version is only a Shroud of 1. But that has a forced, after the House of Reeds is revealed, search the deck for a Night Gaunt and spawn that in the Village Commons. So, depending on the randomness of the events, you could have two enemies spawning in the Village Commons.
Yes.
Which might be one reason why it sort of will direct you back that way, perhaps.
Yeah, exactly.
Or you could end up with none, again, depending on the randomness.
Yeah, we didn't get out
and then,
either.
again, like you said, the easiest one gives you the enemy.
Yes.
As a sort of a compensation,
Yes,
I suppose.
it is. But I mean, a Night Gaunt, I'm assuming it's a hunting Night Gaunt, is a real pain to have flying around, chasing you down. So, because to deal with a hunting Night Gaunt, that usually takes at least a couple of turns, I would have thought, wouldn't it? Usually.
It's 3 fight, 4 health, 1 evade.
Yes.
And it's that nasty one where when you're evading him, you have to double the negatives.
Yes. So
that you draw out of the chaos bag. So yeah, it can be a bit of a pain.
Exactly. Whereas the difference here is we're talking literally a difference of 1 shroud. So it feels like getting the Night Gaunt is a bit worse. Yeah, but I think I'd rather have the 2 shroud, and not get the Night Gaunt than the other one.
Yeah, and just not be able to play events. 'Cause,
yeah.
I mean, with the larger card pool, a 2 shroud location isn't really much trouble.
No.
Whereas maybe back in the early days of Dunwich, it was more of a challenge, perhaps.
Yeah, like if you were playing Agnes or someone, perhaps, I don't know, it might have been more of a challenge. You're right. Whereas these days with, Sixth Sense and things, it would be fairly straightforward. You're right. Yep. Does that leave the schoolhouse?
Right. It does.
Yes. Oh, but I tell you what, when it comes to education provision, this one really is down the list, Kevling. With its crumbling rooftop and rat-infested walls, this is hardly even a house, let alone a schoolhouse.
That is brilliant.
Yes.
You could hardly even call this a house, never mind a school.
Yes, there's no whiteboard or blackboard, so I don't know how they managed to convey information in this schoolroom, that's for sure. And what's that in the middle? Is that like a heater down the centre?
Yeah, it looks like some sort of stove, doesn't it?
That's right.
With a collapsed chimney, it looks like.
Yes. Well, there we go. It doesn't look like anyone's actually been here learning anything for quite a while.
No.
Well, this is a horrible location for getting clues. There's only 1 clue here, mercifully. Is it my turn to read it out? I forget.
It is, yeah.
But it's a 4 shroud. So one version is you cannot discover clues except by investigating. So you can't use, testless, versions.
Yeah.
So you can't find, you won't find an intel report on this schoolhouse. I guess that's what they're saying. And
there's no wandering in and going, look what I found.
Yeah, that's right. And the other one just says, while you're at the schoolhouse, you cannot commit skill cards to the skill tests. So again, that's actually quite tough, because then you would need a fairly high intellect to do that one.
Yeah, and with it being a 4 shroud location, you could end up being that's the one location that you really need to investigate, because it's the last one and the key or the chamber is behind it, and whatever you do, you cannot beat that test.
Oh, that's right. So what do you do if you were playing, say, solo, or not even solo, and the best intellect you have is, I suppose, 3, I suppose would be normal. You could be here for quite a while. Yeah. Wow.
Yes, yeah.
Wow. Wow, that's quite rough, actually.
It is, isn't it? And both versions remove a way of you trying to get that clue by other means.
Yeah. Yes.
You know, either by boosting your skill test or by using some other card effect.
So, if you had your ideal scenario, which of these locations would you prefer wasn't there?
Ooh, from for the schoolhouse specifically.
No, any of them. I'm talking about all of them. I mean, I think the schoolhouse is probably the one you'd probably prefer not to see, I'd say, because of that reason.
Yeah, with it being the 4 shroud, that is the only 4 shroud location, if I remember right.
Yeah, yeah.
I think all the others are 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah, yeah. So,
but on the other hand, it is only one test.
Yes.
So you only have to, it's a difficult one. I suppose it's finely balanced, really, isn't it?
And if you're someone like, what's her name, where she can pull multiple, tokens from the chaos bag, that kind of thing. You can. There's other ways to get around it as well. There's other sort of.
There are now, but less so back then.
Yes, exactly. So that was quite tough actually. The thing
But again, it's a 1 in 5, 1 in 6 chance of that one being in play, and then it's a 1 in 5 chance of it having, or 2 out of 5, 2 out of 6. I can't remember. Yeah, chance of it having the one of the hidden things behind it.
Yeah.
So I guess the odds are in your favour, really.
Yes,
a little bit.
Yeah, you're right. The thing I like about these locations is that it really does bring the village to life. I think it's really nice that it feels like a place. I mean, not a pleasant place, but it feels like a place. It feels foreboding. It's nice the way they've used the flavor text to bring it to life by linking it to the original story. So I think this scenario does a really, really good job of you feeling like you're trudging around a desolate village, trying to work out what you're trying to find the clues and work out what you're supposed to do. I think it does a really good job of that.
And we've talked about the key of the chamber. I suppose we ought to mention the hidden chamber itself now.
Oh, yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah, it's got the subtitle Prison of the Beast, so if that's not foreboding, I don't know what is. So when you reveal the hidden chamber, you put it into play. It's connected to where you are, wherever you found it, but it's locked unless you've found the key.
Yep.
But again, it has no clues for now, and I suppose that's when we go back to the act in the agenda, isn't it?
Yeah, I was going to say, isn't there a Metallica album called "The Hidden Chamber, Prison of the Beast"? If it doesn't,
not, there should be.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
It's very metal, isn't it? It's very metal, that name.
Definitely.
So
now, sad as I am, I actually sat and did the maths here as to how many clues could be on the hidden chamber when that act advances.
Wow.
Or the agenda advances.
Yeah.
Sorry, it was the act, wasn't it? Yeah, so Act 1A is enter the hidden chamber. And what you do then is you reveal any locations that haven't been revealed, you reveal.
Yep.
So obviously that would make all the clues appear.
Yep.
And then you move all of those clues, plus the ones you've already discovered, onto the hidden chamber. And then we've basically got 2 ways of advancing then, haven't we? We either defeat Silas or there aren't any clues.
Yes.
So I was thinking as well, surely that depending on the pattern of the random locations, it may be that you've had to investigate all of those locations to get all of those clues so you could find the key and the hidden chamber.
Yep.
And then all those clues go back again onto the hidden chamber, and you've got to do them all a second time.
Yes. Yep.
So I was thinking that probably if if you had the lucky scenario where you find the chamber and the key straight away, you've only had to investigate 2 locations worth of clues.
Yes.
And then you have to do them all on the chamber. So that's probably the best option for going for the clues, is if you've done it early.
Yep.
Whereas if it was the last location that revealed the hidden chamber, you've had to investigate maybe, a huge number. It's something like 9 clues in total for a 1-player game, up to 18 clues in total for a 2-player game, a 4-player game. Sorry.
Yes.
But once you remove the one location, it's between 6 and 8 for a 1-player, and up to between 14 and 17 clues for a 4-player. And depending on which location got removed. Right,
and that doesn't, and possibly 1 or 2 more depending on how many cultist tokens you pull. Because I think each...
Yes.
Well, if you fail, you've got to fail. So if you pull a cultist token and you fail, you get an extra clue.
And maybe less 1 as well if you've done that clue flipped to a doom thing in the schoolhouse or wherever it was. Not the schoolhouse, the church, I think it was.
Do any of the encounter cards add... Oh, yes, strange signs. So... The strange signs encounter.
Yeah, you dropped one of your clues there, so you could have to investigate that a second time.
Yeah. Oh no! If you fail, add 1 clue from the token pool to your location. 2 clues instead. Yeah. So you actually have to add extra clues.
If there's 3 or 4 players, yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
So there's a hell of a lot of investigating in this scenario.
Yes. Yeah.
Particularly if you want to take that option in the hidden chamber. Obviously, you can just go and beat 7 bells out of Silas if you want, and forget about the clues.
And how do you interpret the clues being there? Because up to now, when you're getting clues, you're rummaging around in these locations, looking for things. Once they're all in the hidden chamber, what are you looking? Are you looking? You're looking for something, or
you've got a bit of dissonance there, haven't you, in the resolution 2 and 3? I mean, obviously, I'm stepping ahead there, but if you take the option of investigating or discovering all the clues, then it depends whether you've got the Necronomicon or not as to whether you do resolution 2 or resolution 3. If you don't have the Necronomicon, the narrative is, you've been scratching around and you've managed to find something on some pieces of paper, and that kind of makes sense with discovering all the clues. Whereas if you have the Necronomicon in your bag all along, that doesn't quite fit in with the investigation side of things, unless it's you frantically going through all the pages of the Necronomicon to find the right incantation.
Which I know that
maybe that's it.
That's probably it, because I don't think the Necronomicon's known for sort of having a nice index, with
glossary of terms.
Glossary of terms. That's right. I don't get the feeling it's like that. So possibly that's about right, actually. So that's where we get to with the act. We get that key and we move forward. It's interesting what the text says, because you find your way into the hidden chamber where you believe the missing folk are being held, but the horrors that confront you there fray the edges of your sanity. Bound by chains in a secluded corner of the room is an unspeakable creature with the face of a man. It wheezes and wrestles to free itself as it notices your entrance. The many mouths covering the creature's body are covered in blood and gristles of meat, as though it had been feeding recently, which suggests it's been feeding on somebody. With a hideous croak, the creature speaks with 7 mouths. Seth. Then it lurches forward as though to grab you, and several of the chains snap. So that immediately tells you that if it's Seth, then the bishops, Seth Bishop and Silas Bishop, have clearly succumbed to the curse. The curse that was on Wilbur and his, father has now passed on to them, and they now have sort of taken that over in that way. So. Yes, so it's like whatever the curse was has been passed on.
And sorry, just looking at the reverse of Act 2A, it actually does talk about what I was saying. Despite the danger, you brave the beast's horrifying presence and investigate further before killing it. So I guess that does sort of cover you're either flicking through the page of the Necronomicon or you are rummaging around in the room to find something.
Yes.
Some information.
Yes. And it's been written by Seth Bishop as well, so he's been writing stuff. So even though he was undecayed and relatively free of things in the original, clearly he's succumbed to the, to whatever it is.
Nice feeding pattern as well. We'll start off with tomatoes, then maybe some small game, and maybe a cow. And then, let's go straight from cow to human sacrifices. Yep.
Yeah, it's interesting, the horrifying detail, tomatoes. And then small games like, okay. It's good to know that if you ever need to feed some horrific creature from another dimension, start with tomatoes.
Yeah.
Italian food is the place to start, apparently. Yeah, I thought that's quite good. And on Seth Bishop, who's massive, and it looks like a sort of a interesting picture, horrible picture, but this again, what walked on the mountains that May night? What rude mass horror fastens itself on the world in half-human flesh and blood was from H.P. Lovecraft. I had to look up what rude mass meant as well, which was very obscure, I have to say, Kevling. Even once I looked it up...
it's not something I'm familiar with. I missed that piece of text.
Actually, when I looked it up, it was no better. Rude mass is an ancient rite celebrating the crucifixion of Jesus, I think, is what rude mass means. So why?
I've just looked it up as well, and it's talking about rude. It means a crucifix, especially one positioned above a rood screen of a church or on a beam over the entrance to the chancel.
Yeah. So I suppose he's trying to be it's sort of blasphemous in some way, I suppose. But again, it's very H.P. Lovecraft. It doesn't sound particularly horrific because it's so obscure what the hell he's talking about. So
I actually work with somebody with the surname of Rude, spelt like that as well.
Oh,
so now I can tell him his name means crucifix.
There you go. Rather than Rude. So yeah, I thought it was something like basic or like they say something is rude, not in terms of being someone's being rude to you, but rude as in basic or unrefined. But it's not that at all. So yes. There we go. So that gets us to where we need to be from the act, but it's a bit more complicated than that, isn't it? Because there's been something else going on while we've been forwarding the act deck. Something that's quite important, I think.
Definitely, yes. So as we didn't actually touch on this at the beginning. We did touch on it, that we mentioned that there is this sacrifice deck, but we didn't actually talk about what it was. So at the beginning of the game, you set up this deck of potential sacrifices. So there's going to be between 2 and 5 in there, depending on how you've played the previous scenario. So you'll always have Sawyer and Watley in there, who were the 2 people that went missing in the introduction when you woke up. But then you could potentially have Armitage, which is if you got resolution 4 on either of the first scenarios. And you could also have Rice or Morgan, again, depending on how well you did in scenarios 1A and 1B as to whether you were able to rescue them or not. So chances are you'll have one or the other, because I think you can only rescue one, if I remember right. So the chances are the other one is going to be in this potential sacrifice deck, or even both of them. So potentially 3, 4, yeah.
Exactly. And then on top of that, you can draw encounter cards that can add to that as well, can't you?
Yes. Yeah, you just make sure you're not playing Pete in this scenario.
Yes. Yes. Otherwise, you could lose Duke. You can literally have Duke sacrifice and not have him for the... I mean, you might as well give up right there, right? Because without Duke...
Yeah, it's what is it? It's the kidnapped test, isn't it? Yeah. Kidnapped encounter card.
Yeah.
Which is... was it willpower or evade test of 4? Yes. So it's not even an easy test. No. And if you fail, an ally in play gets kidnapped.
Yes.
Yeah, like I said, that's bad news for Duke. That is.
Yes, I saw a rather amusing entry on the Arkham Horror Card Game Facebook page. I think someone was saying, "Who's a great investigator to play solo through Dunwich?" And someone had just put Duke, like not not Ashcan Pete, just Duke. You know, Duke is actually the is the person you want to play.
I might be misremembering it, but isn't one of the achievements on the Return to Dunwich Legacy to play as Ashcan and get Duke kidnapped and still finish the campaign?
Oh, probably.
I think something like that.
I tell you what, Ashcan is nothing without Duke, though. I mean, he really.
Oh, you may as well just give up, haven't you?
Yes.
Give up and start again.
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, poor Duke.
Yes.
Poor Duke.
Yeah, I can.
Well, maybe poor Ashcan without him.
Exactly. The other person is Leo. You know, Leo relies on allies.
Oh yeah.
So you know, he's also somebody who could potentially, you could end up in, because with Leo you've got allies to burn, right? You could end up with quite a big sacrifice deck, because there are three of them kidnapped. So you can imagine
three kidnaps, yes.
So you could actually end up with quite a sizable number of people to be sacrificed. So, and I think what happens is that right? Each agenda, somebody gets stuck underneath the agenda deck, don't they?
It depends how many sacrifices are in the deck.
Right.
So that first one, it says if there's 3 or more, then you choose one of them. But obviously, if you've done really well and there's only 2 in that deck to start with, anyway,
You're fine.
Actually, I don't think there ever could be 2, could there? Because, like as we said, you can only ever rescue Morgan or Rice. You can't rescue them both.
Correct. So there would have to be.
So there will always be 3. So
yes.
Maybe there is some really obscure combination of events that lets you only have 2, but I can't think what they are.
Maybe. I'm sure the internet will tell us in their infinite wisdom. The thing is there, though, that if there's only 3, then the chances are it's going to be one of the Dunwich people rather than one of your investigators, which is quite important ultimately.
Yeah.
So the quicker you get through it, the better, quite frankly, because each time the agenda advances, there's 2 things. The longer you take, the more people get sacrificed, and also the more likely you're going to get these kidnapped encounter cards, which you really don't want to draw if you can possibly help it, because like you say, a test of 4 willpower or 4 agility is not insignificant. That's pretty high. So,
and I guess this mechanism of putting one of these potential sacrifices under the agenda there is the act of that person getting fed to Silas.
Yes.
Because no matter what happens at the end of the scenario, even if you completely win everything, whoever is under the agenda is gone.
They've been munched.
So yeah, you've really got to be quick if you don't want to lose anybody.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So like you say, getting those clues as quickly as possible and finding that hidden chamber and that key is absolutely critical, because literally you can find yourself losing all your allies. They've all been gobbled up, basically. Yeah.
And that's how the agenda progresses, isn't it? Agenda 2A is the same. Yep. It's a 6 threshold, and again, another potential sacrifice goes. Agenda 3A is a 7. But then the B side of that is, that's it, everyone has to immediately resign. At least, I mean, you're not defeated, no. You're not killed, you're not insane. It is just a resignation, but that is the bad ending, basically.
Yes. Which is basically, if too many people get munched, you go, this is suicide, we're better off hiding out the night. Basically. Which sounds about right. So yeah, it's quite fraught. There's some really, it's really nice. It's a really pivot scenario, isn't it? It's a pivot because the choices you've made and the things you've done leading up to this impact this scenario, and then how you do this scenario will really impact things moving forward.
So shall we talk about how things pan out then in the resolutions?
Absolutely, yeah.
So obviously the worst scenario is everybody got defeated.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to put in our defeated or resigned, should I say. Yep. The ritual was completed, and then in that instance all the potential sacrifices end up actually being sacrificed, so they all get shifted to the agenda deck. And then they are classed as sacrifice to Yog-Sothoth.
Yep.
And then what we do with those is you record those names in your campaign guide, and if any of those were your player cards, you have to remove them from your deck for the rest of the campaign.
Yep.
And you are recording the unique name, so it's not the fact that only if you've got 2 versions of that card in your deck, you will lose both of them, won't you?
Yep.
Because those unique names now cannot be in your deck.
Yep, they're gone.
You might be saying goodbye to Peter Sylvester or something like that,
Yes.
and kicking yourself for the rest of the campaign.
Yes.
So that effect of sacrifice to Yog-Sothoth, that happens on, like I said before, every single resolution. Whoever is under the agenda deck, they are gone. Also, if you had to resign or defeat, or got defeated, should I say, and you had the Necronomicon, that is classed as being stolen at that point.
Yep.
And again, that is the same with every resolution. And then the 3 differences are your resolution 1, that was the fight option. We defeated Silas Bishop through punching him a lot. That is, we are classed as having put him out of his misery. Yes. The resolution 2, which I think was if you got the clues but you had the Necronomicon, I think, have I got that the right way around? Resolution 2 is the Necronomicon. You classed as having restored him. Whereas if you didn't have the Necronomicon, it's classed as you scratching around finding pieces of Seth's notes.
Yep.
You have banished him.
Yes.
And so those 2 will affect one of the later scenarios.
Yeah, and I like the way you...
One of the setup.
I like the way you kind of characterised it. You get the clues, which is the equivalent of either frantically searching around in a room where there's some weird beast in there, or you're frantically flicking through the pages trying to find them.
Not only that, you're in a room with a weird beast while someone is feeding your allies to you.
Yes, exactly. You know, and you know, all those little post-it notes you put on the Necronomicon, they'd start falling off, you know, because they weren't stuck very well, and it would just be. You know, you can imagine you'd have yellow post-it notes in the Necronomicon for, you know, these give me power. The red ones, these kill people. You know, you'd have it all kind of color-coded for yourself, you know. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yes, because that's kind of not entirely clear, but in the room with you, someone's performing the ritual and feeding them at the same time, right? So...
Yeah,
it doesn't.
Or maybe they're not specifically feeding them. Maybe that's where they are tied up.
Yeah, right.
And he just eats one of them occasionally.
Yes. He just snacks on something.
You know, every 6 or 7 turns. Every 6 or 7 turns, he has another nibble.
Yes. And I always took
with
it
one of his many mouths.
Yes, I always took it that he can't make attacks of opportunity because he's chained up. That's how I always read that. Not that he's sort of doing other things. He can't, you know, if you move out, he can't make an attack of opportunity because he can't get to you. He can't, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it mentions that some of his chains snap.
Yeah.
But obviously not all of them, because otherwise it would have said all of his chains snap. So that sort of indicates that, yes, he is still semi-restrained, which is not quite enough to stop munching on your allies.
Yeah.
And he, if I remember right, he's quite a hefty attack though, isn't he? So although he doesn't do attacks of opportunity, if you're still in the same room as him at the end of the turn, you are going to get a severe punching.
2-2.
I think is it 2 of each?
2 of each, yeah. So yeah, he's not.
Yeah, so depending on your investigator, you can't take too many hits from him.
No, but you know, it's relatively easy to, you know, just do something and jump out if you really want to. The thing that I've always found, and I think we found this, inevitably you end up with at least one whippoorwill chasing you around, which are incredibly frustrating.
They are, aren't they?
Yes, they are. But again, that's a really nice thing because they are part of the story. They're part of this village. They're everywhere, and so it's really nice that they're there, kind of hounding you in a sense, in a very passive way. They don't attack you per se. They just stand there and they take -1 off all your skills. So it's nice.
And with them being aloof, it takes you a couple of actions to deal with them, because you've got to engage them and then fight them.
Exactly. So again, as a solo player, this is quite a tough thing, because the thing about the clues is that yes, there'd be more clues for multiplayer, but there's a few locations which are not. They're just fixed. So it's a pretty tall order for a solo player to do this. I think it's quite a
I think I worked it out. There's between 6 and 8 clues for a solo player, depending on which locations are in play.
Right. So, assuming you
which potentially you have to do twice.
Yeah. So, and that's assuming you're not managing enemies and all kinds of other things. It's quite tough. So, so there we go. So you do all of that. You get those resolutions. So there we go. And then there's an interlude, isn't there? Which is very much directly linked to who survives and who doesn't, which I really like. I think that's great.
Yes. Yeah, although it does feel a little bit repetitive. So if all three of them survived, Armitage, Rice, and Morgan, you find yourself having a very similar conversation with each of them.
Yeah. Yes, I think the main thing is you want to keep Armitage, Rice, or Francis Morgan alive.
Yeah,
I think
one of them needs to survive. Yes,
because if they don't, then you've not got the powder, which will make things more difficult in the next scenario. But you're right. I mean, all of their conversations are all fairly similar, really, for the three, aren't they? They're sort of all, well, I know about this powder and I can help you make it, or I can, they're all sort of...
And then you move on to the next one. Yeah. Oh, what about this powder that Armitage was working on? I've already got it, mate. Yes. It's here, look. I've got it in the hand. It's here.
It's just Zebulon and Earl are a little bit different. They obviously can't do that, but they're prepared to do whatever it takes. So that's nice that they're like that.
And then all 5 of them, you have the choice of adding them to your deck. Well, all 5 that survive, of the 5. Those that survive, you have the choice of adding them to an investigator's deck, which you may want to do or you may not, depending on whether you've got charisma. Or you might be thinning your deck down if you're solo.
Exactly. I think if you're playing this solo, a Leo deck with charisma would be the way to go, because you could just have masses of allies and things.
Yes. So, obviously, if you're a 4-player game, chances are at least one of them has been sacrificed anyway, but maybe the other 4, you all get one each, perhaps, something like that.
So, so there we go. That's Blood on the Altar. So I know a lot of people really like this scenario. I think it's... am I right? I don't know what you think, but am I right in thinking that people think this is one of the iconic scenarios of this campaign? And I think I can see why. I think it's a great scenario. I think it does a lot of things really, really well.
Definitely, and I think the randomised element adds to the replayability as well, because you're never quite sure how it's going to go.
No.
It could be nice and quick. You find the chamber straight away, and you have plenty of time then to deal with all the clues. Or it could be last minute, and you've had to 4 players, and you're having to find 18 clues twice.
Yeah, exactly. I think it does a really good job. I think there's a really good connection between what the story is supposed to be doing and what you're doing in the game. I think they're really close in this one. They don't feel
one of the stronger episodes. I'm calling it an episode again. It's not a television show. One of the stronger scenarios, isn't it, in tying the actual gameplay to the narrative?
Oh, absolutely, and it also ties it to the original story as well, in a way that's really nice, so that it feels like it is a sequel to. You almost feel like Lovecraft could have written this, and it's just because they've done a really good job with that as well. So I think it works on a number of levels, and then it has this payoff. Like I said before, it pivots really, because everything you've done to this point impacts this scenario, and then what happens in this scenario impacts the rest of the game, because it's how many of your allies you manage to save in the process, which will have a profound impact from here on in. So I think it's really quite a pivotal scenario from that perspective as well.
So what have we got next?
Well, next time we have one of the most hated scenarios in the whole of Arkham, which is undimensioned.
What an about turn.
Yes, which is undimensioned and unseen. I have seen a couple of people say that they literally just resign from this scenario and move to the next one because it's just not worth doing. Apparently, I'm neutral about it. I don't know, but I have had some challenges with it, but yes, I know it's not a particular popular scenario. But the next one is about us heading out to actually try and sort of defeat the creatures that are around Dunwich, and that's what we'll be doing next time. So
excellent.
Yes. So very much looking forward to that. Now, if you have any thoughts or comments about what we've been chatting about, please let us know. They're all in the show notes and at the end of this podcast.
And if we've got something horrendously wrong as well, yes, please point it out.
Exactly. And I realise we didn't do the spoiler warning at the beginning, did we? But I think by now people should be pretty right about that we're going to spoil everything. But so I've really enjoyed talking about this. I really enjoyed the scenario when we played it. So I'm not sure if I'm looking forward to the next one. We will see how I feel about it in a month's time. But until then, thanks very much. My name's Robin.
I'm Kevin.
And we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much for listening. Please like, comment and subscribe. We'd very much like to hear from you. If you would like to send us your thoughts, send it to ftextpodcast@gmail.com. That's FTEXT podcast, ftextpodcast@gmail.com. You can also listen to this podcast on YouTube. Just go to Out of Ammo, Out of Time, and you will find it there. And it's also available on the usual podcast platforms, iTunes, Google Podcast, that kind of thing. So if you want to subscribe, go there. But until then, I'm CrabbyTerror8, and I'll speak to you soon. Thanks. Bye.